Support for this podcast comes from the law firm of Davis Malm. Whether you're a developer, property owner, manager, or commercial tenant, their real estate attorneys know the lay of the land, not just the law. Learn more at davismalm.com.
WBUR Podcasts, Boston.
I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and you're listening to The Common. Professor of Political Science at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, Lelia Farsakh. Welcome to The Common.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. So, Lelia, Israel's attacks on Gaza have resulted in the death of nearly 16,000 Palestinians, and that's according to officials there. And while obtaining an accurate count is a challenge, the UN estimated about 1.8 million people have been displaced. Now, the military action is a response to Hamas's October 7th attack in southern Israel, where Israeli officials say about 1,200 people were killed and around 240 were kidnapped. Now, Israel's response in Gaza has led to demonstrations around the world, in the United States, in support of Palestinians. Such events in Boston include a protest at the Boston Common Christmas tree lighting, disrupting a Boston City Council meeting, and at the time of this taping, there's a demonstration planned for President Joe Biden's visit to Boston. So, Lelia, we want to talk to you to get some insight into this moment and the broader movement in support of Palestine. Your research focuses heavily on Israel and Palestine, and you are Palestinian yourself. So first, I want to check in with you and ask you, how have the months of October and November been for you?
It's been dreadful. It's been very scary. Any loss of life is a tragic life. But when we're talking about this magnitude, especially after the war of Ukraine, we know today that more kids were killed in Gaza than in a year and a half in Ukraine. Makes it very glaring and exasperating, because I can't help but ask myself, why is this happening at this magnitude and nobody's stopping it?
Understood. Thank you for that. You've been in the United States for over 20 years now. How have you seen the movement to support Palestine evolve over that time?
It evolved in a very significant way. When I first came here, I came to Boston, and it was a situation where mostly people explained the Israeli side of the story, and the Palestinian side of the story was not told or demonized, So, and then we have September 11, which makes it even more difficult. Islamophobia, anti-Arab and anti-Muslim and anti-Palestinian is all conflated together. But over the years, since 2000, the U.S. in Bush's 2002 Rose Garden comes up and say the only solution to the Israeli-Palestinian problem is the creation of a Palestinian state with provisional borders in the West Bank and Gaza. So you start this peace process, and you also have much more visible Palestinian academics, activists, Arab Americans become much more vocal and intersect with African-American struggle and Native American struggle for equality and justice and inclusion. The space for presenting the Palestinian story widens up, and there's also more reception on the American side. So I think the landscape has changed insofar as people are more aware of this conflict as being Israel is the strong dominant country. We're talking about peace process for the past 20 years. Everybody endorsed a two-state solution, and yet we don't see any state emerging. We just see more fragmentation.
Lelia, I want to ask you about Boston specifically. Now, you teach here, you've lived here for over 20 years. Tell me, what makes Boston's protest scene unique as it relates to this issue of Palestinian liberation?
I think a number of issues. First, the fact that Boston has been one of the oldest destinations for Arab Americans. I mean, Chinatown was called Little Syria in the 1920s and 30s because it had a significant Arab community. It's also a Palestinian and Arab community that's quite educated. So there's this history. There's also the fact that it is an academic city. Many students from the Middle East, both Israelis and Arabs and various, so there is this community. And also Boston has a tradition of activism for social justice issues. We are taking the women's movement, we have Left on Pearl, the civil rights movement. There was a very strong presence and activity in Boston already in the 50s and 60s. And the diversity of the city. I mean, Boston is both a very diverse city, but also that one of the things that surprised me when I came here 20 years ago, I was shocked to see how much it's also segregated as a city. Mm-hmm. So there is the issue of, Black Lives Matters and the injustice and the inequality that African Americans still experience despite a city that has been, in principle, very liberal, very open. So all these factors contribute to the fact that there is a tradition of speaking truth to power, of being activists, of being, engaged in the struggle. And also, I have to say, the Jewish Voices for Peace in the Boston area since the 2000s have grown very much towards supportive of the Palestinians. I think that contributes a lot. The student activism on campuses has been quite assertive, courageous, intersectional. Many of the students who are campaigning for Palestine and demonstrating for Palestine are actually not Palestinians. Many of them are African American, Asian American. Mm-hmm. They see this injustice of their time happening in Palestine and they want to speak to it and address it.
We're going to take a break, but we'll be right back.
Did you kill Marlene Johnson?
I think you're one of the first people to have actually asked.
From WBUR and ZSP Media, this is Beyond All Repair, a new podcast about an unsolved murder that will leave you questioning everything.
Somebody should be in jail for murdering my sister.
A woman who's never been believed.
As long as they think I have done this, then they're not looking for who actually did this.
And that's what makes it a cold case.
No, it's a botched case.
And a search for the truth, once and for all.
Wow, it just gets more interesting.
Beyond All Repair. Listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts.
Be careful. You're digging in a place that's been very peaceful for a while.
Do it anyway. Dig.
And we're back with more from Lelia. I wonder if you could speak to the role of technology in this. This moment reminds me of how, in 2020, when a video circulated online showing a police officer with their knee on this black man's neck, it really illustrated the depth of racism here. Do you feel like a similar phenomenon is happening right now that's galvanizing people and getting them into the streets?
I think so, yeah, because as you said, the 2020 moment of George Floyd saying, I can't breathe, right, for 8.5 minutes, right, has galvanized the whole world to see how much America, despite all the strides it made, still racism is very deep and very profound and is structural, and we need to address the structural inequality and racism. And social media played, of course, a very important role because unlike the official media or the mainstream media, the social media is a free space in a way. And that allowed both people to express their real feeling without having to be censored, but also allowed a much wider outreach among a younger generation. So, and I think in Palestine today what's happening, the war, the atrocity of the war, the magnitude of destruction in this very short time with this at times seems irrational behavior of a state that is a democracy is glaring to everybody and revealing that there is, again, here is a structural problem, which is the problem of settler colonialism. It's the tragedy of Israel. It's both a haven, claimed to be a haven for the Jewish people, and at the same time is a settler state. For the average person who was watching the news or seeing the videos or whatever, is saying, why are innocent people paying the price for just wanting to live? So this resonates with the African American, with the Native American, with the Asian Americans. And like, why do I still face racism despite acquiring good education, despite obeying the rules? I think, yeah, that's resonant. And I think also because human tragedy, I mean, we cannot be silent in front. Just as we could not be silent against what happened, against Russian invasion of Ukraine, we cannot be silent against what's happening now against the Palestinian. And it's, as I said, it's continuous, but today at a much larger scale. And this is why it requires also a much larger intervention from us. We have all a responsibility. We cannot be silent. Otherwise, we're perpetrators.
To the point of being silenced, there's been fierce pushback against folks who are advocating for Palestinian rights. One of our colleagues, Max Larkin, recently did a story where he talked to some college students at Harvard, and some of them talked about losing job opportunities, being threatened or harassed for their stances. Are these kinds of responses surprising to you?
Very good question. It's not surprising to me because the attempt to silence Palestinian voices has always existed, has been a policy of the Israeli state. But that shatters the image of Israel as being a victim and the only democracy in the Middle East. Many Israelis are scared, and I understand what's happened is very, very scary. And also there's the trauma of the Holocaust. And I think that's problematic because these people are conflating things which are very separate. One is anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is wrong, is targeting Jews for being Jews. This is unacceptable. But anti-Semitism is not the same as anti-Zionism. We have to hold states accountable, especially democratic state, but even fascist state like Russia. We still hold them accountable to international law. Israel as a state is responsible to its own citizens. Israel does not speak for the Jewish people. I know this is not the position of the Netanyahu government. It claims that it represents all the Jews, but I think that's where the Jewish community plays an incredibly good role, like the Jewish Voices for Peace and others, where say, Israel does not speak in my name. And we have to insist all the time, you can support Israel. Support Israel to remain the democratic state it claims to be and to hold its responsibility towards its citizens. It is not anti-Semitism to critique it. It's actually a responsibility.
You know, you have people who push back and say critique against Israel is anti-Semitic. But then you have folks who may not really engage because, you know, the thought is, oh, it's too complicated. It's a long, difficult history. What do you say to that?
Actually, not very complicated. It's about these 7 million or 6.5 million Jews who want to live and are living in Israel. This is their home. And another 7 million Palestinians who live in this land that Israel controls, who also want to live there. We have these 14 million people who have been living on this land for the past 75 years, who want to continue to live there, and they have every right to live there, but they need to live there in equality. It's not complicated because of the history. I mean, it's complicated because it requires on each one of us, here and there, to face ourselves and say, do we believe in our humanity and humanity of the other? There's enough place in Israel-Palestine for these two people to live in peace. What is missing is the political will, and what is missing is how to decolonize a colonial reality.
Lelia, thank you so much for coming through to The Common to talk with us about this. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity.
That's Professor of Political Science at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, Lelia Farsakh. And that's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening to The Common. If you have any thoughts on this episode, folks, please feel free to reach out to us. You can hit us up on Instagram at WBUR-TheCommon or send us an email at thecommon@wbur.org. I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and I will talk to you tomorrow.